Great to be here. Of all the introductions, that one's the most recent. That's what I could tell you. It's an old joke. But I do want to thank Reverend Betsy, Reverend Leslie, where's Reverend? And the board for allowing me to speak to you today. To hopefully impart words of wisdom from the universe. Experts say that there are 7 basic emotions, right? And when you look at these emotions, they tell an awful lot about us. So let me see if I can recite the 7 basic emotions without looking at my cheat sheet. There's anger, fear, contempt, disgust, sadness, happiness, or joy, and surprise, right? Go over those again. Anger, fear, contempt, disgust, sadness, happiness, surprise. And so when you look at those 7 basic human emotions, it is no wonder we live in a pessimistic society. It is no wonder, I mean, think about it.
Negative.
2 of the emotions, only 2 are somewhat positive, and that's happiness and surprise. Now, surprise, I think it's more positive than negative. I mean, you don't want to say, I'm surprised they came to repossess my boat, my house, my dog, my cat, my wife, my couch. You would be a little PO, so you wouldn't be surprised, right? You know, think about it. Whenever we're given directions, we never say, go down to the green light and take a right. It's always the stop line. You know,
Right.
So that's where our mindset is a lot of times. And so negative news, gossip, the negative energies, it's these 5 of these emotions feed off that, and we feed those 5 basic human emotions with that. So, we all have those emotions, right? And other emotions come from those emotions. But I think there's one that kind of binds us all together, right? And that's fear. At times we're happy, at times we're sad, at times we're disgusted with things, at times we have contempt for things, at times we're angry. But I'm going to submit to you, every day of our lives, we're afraid of something. We're all afraid of something. Fear kind of drives that. You know, I used to play an awful lot of tennis back in the day, and one of my heroes was Jimmy Connors, who was a great, great tennis player. They once asked Jimmy Connors, what is it that drives you to success? And he never said it was winning. He said it was the fear of losing. He hated to lose. That's what drove him. You know, it's almost like, I came from a world of sales, and if you're sales, you can identify with this. And for 40 years, which is I'm 63, so for a long, long time, and since my early 20s, I've had kind of mental scorecard in my mind. If you sell one day, you win. If you don't sell, you lose. If you sell one day, you get this. Good job, Jerry. That was 1 second. If you don't sell, your managers and those people above you have the tendency to put you something just short of the Spanish Inquisition, right? And so it's because you look at football coaches and they like the wins, but they're never satisfied, right? If they lose something, it stays with them for days, weeks, months, years. If they win, they don't remember the wins, they remember the losses. In 2011, Conan O'Brien, the late night talk show host and the comedian, and actually he was former head writer of The Simpsons, gave a commencement address to the graduates of Dartmouth. And just to re-familiarize myself with it, I watched it last night again. It's about 25 minutes, and it's just hysterical. I mean, it's just really funny. But in there, he has probably some of the best advice and counsel I've ever heard anybody give college graduates. And if you remember Conan O'Brien and The Tonight Show and what happened to him, his dream job was The Tonight Show. He gets The Tonight Show, Jay Leno retires. Jay goes off and does a once-a-week show, and Conan O'Brien takes over The Tonight Show. Conan O'Brien's ratings were Jay Leno's ratings were not good. So So NBC decides to bring Jay Leno back and push Conan O'Brien into like after midnight. So basically, when NBC bought out their contract, Conan O'Brien was without a job. So if you look at Tonight Show, Johnny Carson had it for 30 years, right? It was actually Steve Allen and Jack Parr before Johnny Carson. There's a lot of people here who may not even remember Johnny Carson, so it's just kind of scary. They're going, Johnny Carson, what rap group is he with? Never heard of the guy. So Johnny Carson had it for 30 years, and Jay Leno, his 2 stints, 21 years. Conan O'Brien, 7 months. He only had it for 7 months. He was devastated. Yeah, they paid him a lot of money, but that doesn't solve everything. And he couldn't work for a year in the talk show arena. But he said something so profound. If you hear nothing else, please hear this. It's like one of the most brilliant lines I've ever heard. He said, you know, few things in life are as liberating as having your worst fears realized. Not from a health but the things we want, the things we covet, the things we desire. And he said, I didn't get what I wanted. He said, I was without a job. I was viewed as a failure. Shortest run in Tonight Show history. Okay. So my question is, what are your deepest, darkest fears? Not from people we love, because some things we can control and some things we can't control, right? 5.5 years ago, I started to attend a mediumship circle. I didn't know what it was all about, you know. And one night he said, Jerry, you're going to give a message. And I was like, oh boy, this is not going to be pretty. And so I'm sitting there, and the very first person I gave a message to was Teresa. And I sat there, and I was terrified, because I knew it would sound stupid. I knew it wasn't going to make much sense. I knew I didn't feel connected like I thought I should feel. So I think, if I can remember, I told her that I saw a dog tag in like the shape of a heart. And I went, well, you know, that's just literally borderline the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard of. So I gave it to her. And then she said, well, my dog was just diagnosed with a heart condition. And so that started me on the trail, on the journey of metaphysical gifts. For most of my life, I've not been a really good reader. You know, I could read books, but not retain or sustain information. It's just, I'm just one of those ones. I picked up Jaws, right? One of the books, read 5 pages, and I went, oh, the shark ate the girl. Okay. Nothing ever come of that. I don't see that selling very well. You know, a shark eats a girl, and that can't capture my attention for more than 2 minutes. And yet Spirit said, you need to write a book. And I was like, you don't understand, up until like 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't like books, you know. I used to look at Mad Magazine as a literary excellence, you know. Alfred E. Newman, Mad Magazine, I thought, you know, now that's really good stuff there. And so I wrote a book. Available today for $10. You'll save $2.95. And oh, by the way, my speech here today, sponsored by Evian Water. Just kidding. So I wrote a book. I was terrified. Seriously. Was anybody going to like it? Was it going to sell? You know, because I self-published through another publishing house, and you know, we have some money invested in this. And what's, you know, Spirit, I call Gus, God, Universe, Spirit, right? It's all one big metaphysical triangle. It's all energy, it's all light, it's all vibrations. So just don't worry about it. We'll put the book together for you. So they did. So what is it that Conan O'Brien did? He's out of a job. It was all over the news. He's viewed as a failure. He has a year to kind of get his head right because he can't work in late night television. That was the stipulation NBC put on him. He said, I basically reinvented myself. I started writing. I started blogging. I did podcasts. I did things that I had never done. I did a stand-up comedian. I'd never been a stand-up comic. I did a tour. He said, I was without a job, but it was the most exhilarating year of my life, right? So those things that we're afraid of, the power of fear can overcome us, but I always say fear is something to embrace and learn from. What is it? I always say, what is it about fear that you're afraid of? Right? And a lot of times, our worst fears just aren't what we thought they would be. Several years ago, I started having anxiety attacks. I didn't know why. This is somewhat humorous, so just work with me on this. So I go to our therapist, and he says, so describe your anxiety attack. And I said, well, I'm in the airport because I used to fly for a living. And I'm getting really, really, really nervous. I'm drenched with sweat, and I used to fly for years and years and years. I said, oh gosh, well, how are you when you get on the airplane? I said, I'm fine, I'm great. He goes, time out. Let me see if I understand this. Most people are afraid of the airplane. You're actually afraid of getting on the airplane, but once you get on the airplane, you're fine. I said, yeah, it's exhilarating. He says, you're not having a panic attack. You're having a fear of a panic attack. The panic attack never comes. The fear just overcomes you. So I'm saying fear is something for us to embrace and learn from, right? The greatest discoveries made in the universe, the greatest discoveries we have all made here as people, are made a lot of times because we took one step. We were just so afraid, but we took one step and we said, okay, I'm going to take the next step. I just got to see what happens. And wonderful things happen. So, I am flying through this talk. Could be the small sheets of paper I wrote it on. So we take this fear and we learn to turn it into positive energy, right? Taking a risk is difficult. I mean, I do a lot of reading for people who sit across from me, and I get where they're coming from. And it's 99% women. I actually had 2 men last week, which stunned me. It was great. It was 99% women. And they're stuck in the past. They're afraid to move forward. And I get it. It's a lot of fear, right? But to see just what's not me, I'm just the vessel, right? But to see what Spirit brings to them and gets them to take the courage to take the next step is awful. Just so dramatic, so beautiful, so inspiring. Because see, to overcome fear, we have to take a risk, right? Risk and fear, they're first cousins. They're in the same family. They're not distant cousins, they're first cousins. And so when you look at taking a risk and look at overcoming the fear, a lot of times we take that risk and I'm okay. My arms and legs didn't fall off. I'm okay. So think about some fear. You don't have to do it now, but some fear that you can control. That you have somewhat control over. What is it about that fear that's keeping all of us from taking that next step? Writing this book, it seems like I'm pushing the book a lot. I'm not. I look back on the book every now and then. Folks, I don't remember writing half of it. Even though I lived with it for about 2 years, I'll read something and go, wow, that's really good. I don't think I wrote that. I think, I sat down one time and Spirit laid out the chapters, laid out, the 49 sub-chapters of this. Spirit told me to stop at 49. I've told this story an awful lot. I love telling the story. And I went, well, why not 52? Just 3 more and be 52 once a week. Spirit said, just trust me. Stop at 49. Okay. So I looked up the number 49. right? Because I had to look up the number 49. And it's really a highly spiritual number in most religions: Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity. I said, that's good enough for me. Then one day I'm driving, and my daughter works downtown, and she said, have you seen Pulse since the incident, the massacre? I said, no. I'm driving by, and then it hits me. There's 49 souls lost their life at Pulse. Yeah. And so, taking that risk, even putting the book together, taking the risk to using metaphysical gifts. I tell people all the time, I'm glad you come to me for readings, but you don't need me to connect. You really don't. I'm glad you do. My wife is glad you do, because she's the budget director. But you don't have to come to me to connect. Everybody has these gifts. So last thing I want to say is, struggling with metaphysical gifts because of the newness, right? Because of the newness, Spirit was going, just relax, just allow, and just trust. We got your back, right? And so I would say to everybody here, including myself, I'm at the top of the list. There's times to reinvent yourself, and I feel this year is a time for a lot of us to reinvent ourselves. Self-transformation. Richard Rohr, the great Franciscan priest, says transformation doesn't happen when you're up on the mountain. It happens on the descent. It happens when you're in the dark places. That's where transformation happens, right? Because that's when we listen the most. And so this self-transformation, this reinventing yourself, I think Spirit calls us all to do that again and again and again. And it's okay to embrace fear. You just got to remember to let go. And put it in a box and set the box aside. And guess what? It's going to come out again and again and again and again. But you're going to know how to deal with it. Learn from the things that we're afraid of. And I tell you, go about reinventing yourself, and amazing things are going to happen. Trust me, amazing things. That's it. Thank you very much. Peace. Thank you.